strangle you.
Just immediately hear your phone buzzing like, bird.
It'd just be one of those old, like, U-shaped phones and just, like, a tongue coming out.
Ew. Ew.
That is decidedly gross.
Borrowed that visual because it literally happens in Outlast.
It does?
That game has some nightmare sequences that just kind of happen.
Well, you've launched into the first topic of the podcast, I guess.
Yeah. What about Outlast 2?
Welcome to Four Nerds Save the Universe, episode 25. I've been playing Outlast 2. It's probably not as good as Outlast 1, is mainly what I'm getting from it so far. It's kind of a letdown. I'm kind of baffled by many elements of its design, just in general. Like, two of the main things that I'm finding really strange, actually, is like, everyone knows about the battery mechanic. Because in Outlast 1, you have a night vision camera, and you can use it to document things, and like you point stuff at key items, and then it's like, ooh, I wrote down a note about that thing, and you can read like your character's inner monologue in text form about the thing that you found, which is always kind of neat. That was all nicely implemented. Now it's all like really poorly implemented. So now instead of just looking at something and having your character instantly write down a special thing about that little thing and him losing his mind as everything gets worse and worse and stuff in the asylum, now you have to stare at something with your camera while a ring slowly fills up because you're filming it. And what's really awkward about that is that a lot of the things that the game wants you to film for that stuff doesn't stand still. And if you lose focus on it, it starts over. But like if the thing you're filming is like a guy walking past a doorway dragging a body, for example, then the moment it's out of frame, it's gone forever, and you can never get that note because you only held focus on it for like 10 seconds as opposed to 12 seconds. So like you didn't quite get it at first on time, or you lost focus for a second and had to refocus on it or something like that, and then it walks away and it's gone, and then and then it's just gone, you didn't get it. Like that kind of stuff happens constantly, which is really awkward. There's other moments where something's sitting completely still, but I can't tell which part of the thing I'm supposed to look at it to make the circle fill up, and then at some point the circle just stops filling up forever because it gives up forever. It's really weird.
What I'm lacking, and I haven't looked into Outlast 2 whatsoever.
Yeah.
What I'm like missing from in terms of like context and understanding about this game is like, who the hell do you play as? Like, why? So in Outlast 1, spoilers, but the main character dies. So who do you play as? Like, are you going back? Is this a prequel or like?
So how does this work? Looking for your wife, from what I remember.
So to recap what happened in this franchise, in Outlast 1, you play as Miles Upshur, which is like an investigative journalist that hears about bad things happening in an asylum, so he sneaks in, and that was a bad idea. In Outlast Whistleblower, the DLC that's 2.5 hours long, which is that's like half of a game by horror game standards. Compared to the original campaign, that's like half of the game. It's crazy.
That's true. It's a very short game.
In Whistleblower, you play as the titular whistleblower for that asylum that sent out the notice about what's happening there, and causes Miles to show up in the first place. So it's a prequel to the original game. In Outlast 2, at this point, I think I'm like 80 to 90% done with the game, and there's no reference of any kind to Outlast 1 existing. So I don't think it has any continuity. It's just another camera-based horror game where you run around.
Did they do that with Amnesia, that the different amnesias weren't related at all?
Well, there's only one other amnesia. There might be two other amnesias, I guess.
Because there's Penumbra, Amnesia.
Well, Penumbra is a different franchise. Those are 3 games. That's a trilogy of games.
Yeah,
and those might have to do with each other. Though. Yeah, but it's a different franchise. If you call it a different franchise, there's no implication of it being the same universe.
That's a good point.
So I have a gap in knowledge here. As far as I've heard, I think A Machine for Pigs was its own thing. It's basically made by different people anyway, because it was from the Dear Esther people, and kind of collaborated with the Amnesia people a bit. But the Amnesia people made Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Amnesia Justine, which is a free expansion. And I don't know if those even were tied to each other, to be honest. But my issue is I never played Dark Descent, so I don't know what its story is, so I can't tie it to other games they've made. But for Outlast 2, I think you're investigating something about... I think they found a girl who died, and they were tracing her back to where she came from, because she was like a missing girl or something like that. And so they're going out into the woods and the mountains on a helicopter that ends up going down. Mm-hmm. And so you're just stranded there. You wake up from the crash, isolated from everyone, and I think you find the pilot like horribly maimed in like a way that was clearly not caused by the crash, and your wife's just gone. And so you're looking for your wife for a big chunk of the game, and you keep getting closer, and you even make contact with her at certain points in the game, but then like things tear you apart, and that kind of stuff keeps happening. The game's basically like a weird like religious war between two crazy, insane cults that have the most bizarre beliefs that can't even be compared to anything, really.
And has she been captured because she's supposed to be some kind of bizarre sacrifice or something, or what's
kind of?
Yeah, she just has a nice butt.
It's more or less that she's viewed as being significant for different reasons by the two different cults that are fighting over her, basically. And it just gets gory and bloody and crazy, and before long it gets too absurd, frankly. So in Outlast 1, you would find like cells full of people everywhere, and you would take out the like a lot of the people are just alive in various rooms and locations all over the asylum, and hiding or attacking you or just walking around, or some of them are beating their heads on walls. Like they all do different things, and that's why it's kind of scary, is you don't know which ones might be aggressive. And there's a lot of sections about navigating past a bunch of passive enemies, passive inmates. But like bodies happen, but they're not like oceans of bodies. But this place you get to is like this tiny boony village that seems to only have like any given area has like 5 like shack houses, and that's it. And then you go from place to place and you see more settlements here and there, all sort of loosely connected. But like you will just see oceans of bodies everywhere, like hundreds of them, and it's like incomprehensible how many bodies there are.
So this is what you were talking about, where you were saying that Outlast 2 takes place in a very open environment, and the gameplay doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
So
I'll get to that in a second.
Was the asylum, right?
Yeah, Outlast 1 was an asylum, and that was important because it was in hallways.
Right.
So yeah, let's talk about that right now. So like Outlast 1 had a very specific formula that generally worked, and the game wasn't too long, so it didn't really get old very quickly. Although it did feel... I do remember thinking it felt like it was an hour too long at one point, but whatever. The basic idea, though, is that the vast majority of the time you were indoors, and when you were indoors, you had this situation where you were just... It's always hallways or side rooms and stuff like that. So if you were stuck in a spot where you had to get past an enemy and they were going up and down a hallway, then you would go into a side room and try to hide in the side room and hopefully not get attention to yourself, and then wait for the sound of them to walk past, then sneak by past them. And it was fairly basic stuff. And if they were alerted and you knew they were coming, you would try to hide in a locker, because there was lockers everywhere in that game, and hopefully wait for them to pass. And if you were stuck in a scripted chase sequence where, like, because there's always parts in these games where you get caught no matter what, and the enemies see you and you have to try to get away, it's a series of hallways, so you would just keep running away from the enemy. It was pretty natural to determine what that direction was and what you're supposed to do in those kinds of situations. There on that side of the hallway, run the other direction, and then, like, solutions just present themselves before you, like, oh, a door, I'll open it, go through it, close it behind me, and sometimes that door would have, like, a big heavy thing you can push. So like, oh, I'll push that in front of the door. Obviously, I'm supposed to try to do that. Or you'd encounter like a vent that you can jump up to and crawl through the vents to escape into the next region that way. Like, it was always relatively natural to figure out what to do, and it was all a matter of reaction. It was like twitch reaction and just like tension, basically, while the soundtrack loses its mind and all that shit. But that only works if you aren't dying constantly. This is a problem with horror games, is that they have an inherent way that they kind of clash with the concept of difficulty. Because if a game, when a horror game is not difficult and you're just running away, like you can make them too easy and that there's literally never tension. But if you make them too hard, they become Alien Isolation, where the game becomes like Alien Isolation is an effectively designed stealth game, but it's really hard to be afraid of that game because you're literally thinking about like the formula behind how the alien works and how to manipulate that AI in order to achieve your goals. And you can't, like, unless you're playing on like super easy mode or something, like you can't get through the game without going into that headspace because the alien is too difficult to beat just running around like an idiot and hoping to survive by being afraid. Like, that doesn't work. You can't just be afraid and run away and hope the alien doesn't catch you because he's too fast, too ever-present, and so on. And so that game's too hard to be properly scary, and instead but it makes up for it by being a relatively deep stealth game with crafting mechanics and all these different noise mechanics and AI things you can work against each other via like the human crowds and the alien and using them to distract each other and stuff like that. Outlast is not deep. Outlast 2 is not deep, so it doesn't have mechanics to rely on, but it's also too hard. And I don't mean too hard as in like freaking Dark Eater Midir in Dark Souls 3 fighting this guy for like an hour. Like that, not that kind of hard. It's too hard for the goal that it sets and the feelings it wants you to have. Because I'm like actively trying to pay as much attention as I can to what's going on around me. And there's moments where I'm like, I just can't fucking figure out what's going on and what I'm supposed to accomplish. And
That's
the moment
actually what happened to us in the first game, where we kept going on this loop where we would run, try to find a new area to get to, and then we'd have to climb up into the vent and start all over again.
Didn't you two give up on the doctor segment, or did you get a little bit further than that?
Just after we got our finger cut off, because it was...
To be fair, after that segment, in my opinion, the original Outlast goes downhill really fast. It picks up at the very, very end, but like it's a lot of filler content from that point
issue
forward.
With that was because we would either get caught before we could fully investigate our avenues, or we would escape him long enough to get glimpses of other places that we could go to, and then we'd have to retreat up into the vent, which was our only safe place. And then we'd attempt it again and again, but we weren't really making much progress. And at that point, Carl was pretty fed up with the jump scares and everything.
It wasn't even the jump scares. Like, so I can deal with jump scares. They will freak me out. Prey is effectively a nonstop train of jump scares because of the mimics, but like those don't bother me. It's just the fact that it was nothing but run around and maybe look for a way out. Like,
that's a very bad, confusing, designed like segment of the game, in my opinion.
Like, Resident Evil 7 did the same thing, but I could deal with it because the enemy was slow but relentless, and you still had plenty of time to look around, and you had plenty of audio knowing that like this person's coming, but they wouldn't like they wouldn't sprint after you. So as long as you were just moving and like trying to find a way to go, you'd be okay. With Outlast, the enemies would sprint after me, and unless I got like really lucky, I was pretty much doomed unless I could like find a hiding spot and stuff like that. And it was harder for me to enjoy because I didn't get the chance to look around or be interested in anything. Not to mention the entire environment was effectively just there as set pieces. Whereas
I was going to say, like, you didn't miss anything by not looking around.
I know, but like, there was just no immersion.
All you did was miss out on the batteries that you were also wasting by looking for batteries.
Yeah,
that is very true.
Like Magic Find, except more annoying.
So I don't know. I was kind of annoyed about all of that. It wasn't a bad game. It just wasn't for me. And now that I'm playing like deeper and more interesting horror games. Oh yeah, I forgot the other reson why I didn't like it is I had played Keith. What's that really good?
Well, we didn't.
Lone Survivor.
We're still like not really through. Are we trying to like change topics or no?
No. I was just going to say that's why I didn't like Outlast is because I had already played Lone Survivor, which did horror really well. And so I just couldn't get into it because Lone Survivor had so much better of a premise, and like the enemies were freaky, but it was more the atmosphere and everything that made me scared than the actual like, just being frustratingly chased down and murdered repeatedly. If that makes sense.
I did kind of feel like Lone Survivor got samey, like despite not being particularly long to begin with. Like you spent a lot of the game fighting the same enemy over and over again, and there's such a formula to how to fight it that I didn't always feel like there was that much of attention to it.
Yeah, I can see that.
It felt like more of an exploration game that was atmospheric as opposed to like a horror game necessarily, because it's more like I'm just figuring out where to go next in this Metroidvania like ish level design, and also trying not to run out of ammo because I will it could literally become unplayable if I run out of resources.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the issue with and by the way, the Dr. Traeger, like I think Dr. Traeger was supposed to be like their attempt in Outlast 1 of having like a boss fight more or less in a game that doesn't have combat. Because like instead of every other part of the game, even after that, is usually just run away or stealth through it. And in that
you
one,
were effectively in an arena.
yeah, that was a circular area that loops around itself with all the different hallways everywhere, and you essentially had to find an object. You had to find an object and a destination for the object, if I remember correctly, because you were more or less like unlocking something to escape into like the elevator or something.
Yeah.
You had to get to an
with the
elevator.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so you
but we couldn't
had
find
a
the
place
key
where
or-
you could mix both stealth and running while trying to just desperately get around. And I found it manageable because you could kind of kite him because he wasn't super fast, so you could actually kind of keep getting tables between you and stuff. But yeah, like there's definitely a moment of like, where is the item I need? Because like it's somewhere in this level and I'm running from him, which makes it hard to look for it. And the problem is, like a lot of Outlast 2 just becomes that to an extent.
Oh, really? That's a shame.
A big gap here that I think is important is Traeger would deal damage to you, which is important. Outlast 2 enemies don't tend to deal damage to you. They tend to just kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're doing this. So like you could get hit like 3 times by Traeger, which is way more manageable. But like, imagine the same situation of like desperately trying to figure out what the hell your objective is and where they hit it and what the hell's going on. And also every time you get hit, you instantly die and start over and over again.
Yep.
Like there's just moments in Outlast 2 where I just spawn in a room, or I fall like through a rotten floor, and I'm like, oh, we're in a dark alley or some sort of dark, creepy basement I've never seen before with no context. And look, enemies are in every direction. So it's like, oh, what direction doesn't have enemies in it? Well, that didn't work. Well, that didn't work. Well, that didn't work. Okay, that's the way I go. That didn't work though. I got to go left instead of right next time. And like you're just respawning over and over again, even on normal difficulty, because everything kills you instantly. Like it's actually so rare to take damage that I'm actually baffled by the other mechanic they added to the game, because I talked about the stupid filming thing that doesn't work half the time and is really clunky and awkward. But in addition to batteries, they've also added bandages now. So if you take damage, you can heal with a bandage. But that would make sense in Outlast 1 where you took damage and would have to actually had to worry about your health.
But since
in
you're
Outlast,
getting killed, what's the point?
In Outlast 2, I never use a bandage because I just die on the spot. There's 2 times where I've actually taken damage and not immediately died from that enemy and was like, oh, I guess I could hit the heal button now. And then the 1/3 time where it's literally a scripted sequence where oh, you're so hurt, you need a bandage to do the story now. Is go find a bandage was the objective basically. That's one of the 3 times I've used a bandage in the game, and I'm done with it almost.
Does it ever bug you in games where your character is ostensibly fine, and then suddenly cutscene happens and your character's grievously wounded, and all of your medicine and healing items don't do anything? You're struggling along.
Yeah, that is a really, really annoying mechanic.
I understand it from a story perspective, but it's just I
remember that distinctly
or just
happening
the feeling
in a lot
of your reward for winning is losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happened to me today in Neo. I fought Oda Nobunaga, and when I'm defeating him, the cutscene is me losing to him, and I'm like, what? but he wasn't that hard even.
I feel like that happened a lot in old Final Fantasy games where it's oh no, your character has some sickness and you're gonna have to go cure them, or oh no,
your reward
for
winning this boss fight is your dead party member.
No, I mean Final Fantasy IV leaps immediately to my mind, where one of the first things that happens in the first 20 minutes of the game is 2 characters get turned to stone and they become statues, and then they're just dead for the rest of the game basically. And it's that's just a status effect. There are items that you take when you fight things later on in the game that make you become unturned to stone. And
Yeah, it's a hard thing to process when the franchise regularly hits you with a spell called Death that you just shake off with another item that you just use to heal people from death.
Yeah, this death is a permanent death, unlike the other deaths.
It makes it so that all combat and the terminology built into combat is totally divorced from all of the logic of the story in any way. Like,
Right.
it's one thing that you teleport into a magical combat screen where you fight people, but also, like, yeah, I guess you're not supposed to acknowledge anything that happens in those fight segments. Like, I think Sucker Punch, the movie, was inspired by JRPGs, basically. Because anytime anyone resolves their problem in that thing, they go into a fantasy fight in a different world that has nothing to do with what's going on. And then when that's over, that affects the outcome in the real world, basically. And I think that's how every JRPG works that has, like, the whole, like, early Final Fantasy style teleport into a weird screen where you fight things.
Mm-hmm.
Weird. Like, to close out last, like, the biggest problem I have right now with the game, because I talked about, I kind of started small and went big from, like, grievances, like pointing cameras at shit to fill up a meter, and then, like, oh, I didn't get that note for my camera, oh no, like, only matters if you care about, like, if you really care about the one utterance your character's going to say about that clip later, or like achievements, I suppose, are probably a thing for that. But like the bandages are like whatever. Like, oh, there's bandages that are pointless. Oh well, I've played Assassin's Creed games before. Every single Assassin's Creed game adds a new mechanic that largely doesn't matter because they already had a formula for those games before they added that mechanic. But like, it gets way bigger when you start dealing with the instant death things during chase segments, which is crazy because in the previous game, you understood the geometry of the game around you. It was these concrete hallways with doors, and like there's a formula to how it's all going to land, how it's all going to work out. You knew where event would be if there was going to be one, or where a locker would show up. But this game is like collapsed buildings and cliffy hillsides and forest and barbed wire
so
fences.
you have no idea. You don't have like landmarks to get back to where you are.
You have no idea what your environments are going to be shaped like. So whenever a chase segment happens, which is often like a chase segment that's scripted in particular, almost always happens by you falling into a place, which is inherently a problem because then you're like, oh, I already don't know where I am, but also I'm already running from something. And so you have moments like, can I jump at that? No. Can I climb over that? No. Can I crawl below that? Nope.
They have the entire geography like magically just like injected in their brain, so they're not slowed down by it at all.
And like the game likes to have like a log tumbled over like a collapsed tree, and like the coin toss of whether or not you're supposed to jump over it or crawl over under it is like incomprehensible. Like it's clearly not touching the ground, but you can't crawl under it. But sometimes you can clearly see over it, but you can't jump over it, and like it's just a gamble which one's going to work.
Boy, that sounds like a disaster.
So what, you just run headlong into it if you choose the wrong one?
Just every single time every time I do a chase segment, it's just trial and error. I just try a thing and then I try a different thing each time. And an additional thing that happened here is the game starts to feel very Slender-like at times because there are these wide open areas. Like these chase segments I'm talking about are just a lack of visual clarity where you can't it's not signposted what you're supposed to do. There's no Tomb Raider like bird shit covered ledges that you can climb on that to denote that you can climb on them, or like in Horizon Zero Dawn, like where everything's magically painted for some reason when you can climb on it. This game's so chaotic visually that you just can't tell what to interact with. But on top of that, like there's the wide open Slender type places, which they slightly did a little bit in Outlast 1 when you go into an open courtyard in the darkness, and you'd be like, oh, somewhere around here is a gate. But like those parts were pretty basic because it was like a square-shaped area and somewhere there'd be a gate, and you're mostly just trying to avoid the sound of the one monster guy that's somewhere around and not trying to alert him while you search. So it's tense. That's a tense moment. It's actually my favorite part of Outlast 1, like the scariest moment for me, was when you're underground in like the sewers, and somewhere out there you can hear the rattling chain of Chris Walker. I'm like, he's fucking here. I don't know where to go, but he hasn't found me yet, and like that constant anxiety is really good. But in Outlast 2, the enemies are way more likely to see you, and in many cases, like I just find myself picking a wall and following it in a circle and seeing if it takes me somewhere, because at some point, like I will have tried so many directions. Isn't that how most people
beat the courtyard segments, though?
Yeah.
Like, you just follow along the wall, and then you climb on top of the wall, and then you just go around. Like
this thing has
that's
a
what
weird
I
issue
always saw
because
people
when you're
doing.
looking around, there's no signposting where, like, even when you find a thing, you can't tell if it's where you're supposed to go or not. Like, you find a barbed wire fence that has fire behind it, and you're like, oh, fire. Light sources are usually where you're supposed to go, right? And when you find out where to go, finally, it was nowhere near that. Or, like, you'll find houses, and you're like, oh, cool, a house. This must go somewhere. And you go inside the house, and you can search around the bottom floor, go upstairs, search around the top floor, and, like, maybe there's one battery, maybe there's literally nothing, and it's just a house. It's just there to waste your batteries while you look around, not knowing where to go. And I'm just like, the fuck? Like, you will often there's moments where, like, especially this with this guy that has a crossbow, where, like, you just spawn in, like, a giant circular area, and you just don't know which direction's the way out. Like, it feels like searching for the randomized pages in Slender, where you're like, this. I mean, it's scary. It's kind of scary the first time. But if you have to trial and error it over and over again, or God forbid have the same scenario repeat, like, it's just not as interesting. And so, like, it's definitely just a game where I'm just like, try this. All right, I'll try going this way, and you just kind of just keep looping until it works out. And it's weird because they probably had more money and more experience to draw on, and more of a template on how to make their next sequel, and they just, like, didn't. So it's like they didn't know what made their first game work. Like, I'd be surprised if I found people that thought this one was better than the first one.
I mean, I have some people that are saying that they prefer Outlast 2 because they think the story is a lot better. Which, I mean, it sounds like there was a lot more tooth to the story, at least based on what you were saying. Like, with these factions, like, it feels like they put a little bit more into their world. But
I just wonder if they build the game around the story at that point, as opposed to the other way around. Didn't we discuss this another time?
So
no, this sounds like news to me.
Yeah.
Have we discussed this idea?
We talked about it last time.
I love-hate the story.
You love
so,
what?
There's something about the story that's...
the story.
Yeah. So there's two things in the story, and I haven't finished it, so I don't know if it comes together in a meaningful way that's interesting or anything, but the main story, when you get there, is those two warring factions. One of them is, like, this horrible, like, religious leader that has taken control of all of the Hicks in this neighborhood and convinced them of his horrible ways. And he's basically it really seems like he's basically created, like, a sex cult where he can just use everyone he wants and toss away people he doesn't want and stuff like that. Like, it's a really horrible society that's just serves this one man. Like, yeah, like, it seems like he might even have some sort of situation where he's, like, immune to syphilis but carries it and just keeps infecting people, and it's literally literally just throws them away in a place called the Scalded, where there's, like, the syphilitic colony of all the people that he's used up and thrown away, basically. Like, it's a really fucked up faction. Whereas the other one is, like, the rebel faction that are, like, the paganist group, where, like, you inherently want to think they're going to be better because they're not him, but they're still really shitty. At the very least, they're violent, which is enough of a problem, but they're less disturbing at the very least. They seem to be weird mud men or something, they're always just covered in mud and have sticks sticking out of the mud that's on them, and they tend to stab you a lot, so you don't get a good look at them.
Do they just want to, like, revert back to nature and stuff, like, man, live amongst the trees and stuff?
I mean,
that
considering
kind of
who
stuff?
they're up against, I think they'll take anything as an improvement.
I think they're primarily defined in their rebellion against the other group, basically. But the part of the story the part of the story I don't like is the moment your protagonist starts experiencing trauma, he starts having these weird flashes back to when he was in school. It's like, I don't think it's even high school. It's probably, like, elementary school or something. He flashes back to, like, being at his elementary school with all the lockers and little kids everywhere. But it's just like,
was he being bullied?
Well, it becomes clear almost immediately that a girl he knew in elementary school killed herself.
Oh, okay.
Like, via hanging. And so he just keeps hallucinating, going through the dark halls alone, and sometimes he'll encounter the dead girl, or sometimes he'll encounter some sort of horrible, weird, like, Silent Hill style monster that's completely not a real thing, but, like, some sort of, like, amalgamation of, like, tongues and limbs and shit that will just kill you violently because it's a nightmare monster. And what's really jarring is that you will teleport between those two locations constantly in the story. And it's like it's cool like once or twice, like, oh, you climb this wooden ladder and you get to the hatch on the top and you open the hatch and it's this you're in the pool area of the school now instead of the like nightmare hellscape that is the main game, and you'll just transition between them fluidly as if it's one environment. That's kind of neat, but almost immediately those places super drag. Because the issue with the school sections is they have zero direction of any kind. You just are in them, and you're like,
you're
where do I
just
go?
meant to get survive for a set period of time and not get captured in those segments or something.
No, you have a destination, but it's got a problem where it's got like it's really awkward scripting stuff where like it's not. Sometimes you just go from point A to point B, and you can't always tell where point A and point B are sometimes. But other times it's like a really awkward series of things you click on in order to proceed. And you can't always tell what they are or what the game expects of you and stuff like that. So so it'll often do stuff once and never again. Like you'll have moments where like, oh, this time you click on a computer and clicking on the computer is how you proceed with the story. This time you run from the monster,
that
but
sounds
also
really frustrating.
But also you have to hide in a locker on the left side, which you've never ever had to do before. It's literally the only locker in hundreds of lockers that doesn't have a lock on it. And you hide inside it, and then when you slam the locker closed, then outside the locker is actually the real world instead of the school, and you leave into the real world. Like, they wanted to have that transition, but they did it via a mechanic that didn't make sense, and they did it via a chase segment, so it was trial and error to figure out how to escape. Because oftentimes when this monster shows up in the school world, you'll just start running in every possible direction, and then dying, and then trying the next direction, then dying, and then trying another direction, and then dying. Like, completely arbitrarily, because we're using the same location over and over again and just locking and unlocking different configurations of doors, you can't tell which doors do and don't open, and it's almost always lit the same way. So like the lighting effects of like Outlast 1 aren't really guiding you of like where to go and where like what places might be your solution and stuff like that. Like in Outlast 2, the school almost always looks the same, so you just wander halls at random in order to get where you're trying to go, and it mostly just feels like padding, because at some point I swear like 50% of my playtime is spent at the school, and it's just one location repeating, and it's like
wonder,
it's not
real
interesting.
School.
It just makes me wonder if they had multiple ideas for plot or setting, and they're like, oh, well, these are both so good. Why don't we just incorporate both of them somehow? Oh, and then also the fact that you said that the majority of the new game doesn't take place in any kind of enclosed space. It's mostly like open courtyards and stuff. So maybe they're like, oh, well, we need to use the locker mechanic from the first game, but where can we? Oh, let's have him, have high school dream sequences. And
I'm not sure. It might be a little bit hard to infer that much, at least based on what Keith's told us so far.
The school sections are baffling because of the fact that like that's what they already did well before, was internal locations where you run from a thing. So it's baffling to see them not do it right here in a game that is the sequel to that. And like, but I think it's because they specifically just made a school that every school level will take place in, instead of making levels for what they wanted to do. But it's the school sections just exhibit every single flaw the game has to the nth degree, and they just drag. Like at some point, there's just way too many of them. They're too long. And nothing is accomplished in the vast majority of them. It's just building up to some sort of jump scare involving a monster you don't have any concept for the meaning of, and
so it hasn't imparted any like knowledge pertinent to the character that would actually play a role in the current story.
Like I've basically found out, no, not in the current story so far, unless the ending ties it together. But like so far, like the monster will show up sometimes. The girl, they keep using the imagery of the girl being hanging. They imply that the main character liked her, and they imply that maybe she was suffering abuse. But like that's over the course of like what I think may have already been like 10 levels spent in the school already.
Okay,
and it's 3 things were communicated to me so far.
The one tie-in that I could potentially see is in this game his wife was taken. Maybe he just doesn't want to lose someone else that he loves again.
Oh, right.
So,
that was ostensibly the point. Wow,
right.
we have That story's going off the beaten path.
Well, right. So, like, that I could see being the tie-in where maybe he did care for the girl in high school and she died and wants to find a way to prevent his wife's death.
I just can't imagine.
I mean, I don't think you really need a particularly strong external motivator to be like, I don't want my wife to die.
Yeah.
Like,
But that's why it's the reason
Thanks for
why
backing me up
he
on that,
has
Wander.
the flashbacks of the high school.
But,
Yeah.
like, after a certain point...
it's just too much.
Well, yeah, especially because, like... So this random other girl
it's
died.
like spending 3 movies explaining how Vader went dark. It's just too much. It's way too much for one plot point.
Mhm.
Like, we'll see when I get there, but I'm really having trouble imagining the payoff for this storyline being worth just how much time is spent being sidetracked there. Because it's like half the game. It's way too much.
If it was a character we legitimately cared about, and we cared about his trauma, sure, but it sounds like his trauma takes place more than his actual character development.
Yeah, and I think that for most horror games, you don't want to have the character have too much depth, honestly. Like, who cares about that? It breaks, like, the player, like, putting themselves in my opinion, but...
Well, yeah, it breaks immersion if you actually have a character that you...
Because you're,
you
like,
are
yeah,
interested
you're... Exactly. That's a good way.
And it's also a thing where, like, when I criticize this, I already know, like, the go-to response that's going to happen is that sooner or later it's going to tie into the main story, obviously, and then people are like, well, obviously it makes sense, but making sense isn't the same thing as being executed well. Like, I mean, technically, behind the scenes, when you have all of the plot points on, like, a bullet list, the plot of Final Fantasy 15 makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a nightmare garbage storm. It's still badly done in every conceivable way, but it technically makes sense.
Well,
Funny,
isn't
man.
the issue with that too? Didn't they explain a lot of the backstory of the characters through?
Well, I mean, arguably the biggest event for Final Fantasy 15 is, the city falling in the very beginning, and they had a movie do that off camera.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 15
like the
part of the
show,
story
don't
is a war between two nations in a way where the first nation falls off camera in a movie you have to watch separately, and the second nation falls off camera and that's never visible anywhere that you can ever watch.
It takes away all agency away from the main protagonist.
Everything just dies off screen, including the world eventually and all of your friends. Just everything in Final Fantasy 15 just always dies off screen. It's a good thing you're not the protagonist in that story, but let's not go back into that long-ass discussion.
Yep.
Okay.
Blah.
Stand by me.
Can we talk about Prey?
Go ahead.
It's fucking good. Second favorite game all year after Hollow Knight. Puts everything else to shame. Pretty much.
Prey is good.
Zelda.
Prey is fine.
Oh shit.
You just said it puts Zelda to shame, you monster.
Shit. I've been playing Zelda so long I forgot it came out this year.
That's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe third. It's a hard sell. Probably third.
It reminds me of when
know.
I played Witness in January of that year, and I was like, I gotta remember this all year for when I'm trying to think about what my favorite game this year was, because it came out in January, and I know I'll forget.
Yeah,
Think about
I
okay.
can barely discern one
I
month
think
from
I'm
the
still
next.
going to maybe put Prey above it. So I like Zelda.
No, I just took umbrage with you saying that it puts it to shame.
Sorry, you're right. I was thinking of Horizon Zero Dawn and a couple other things. I mean, 2017 has been amazing for games already.
Yeah.
But like, Prey has
Did
definitely
we talk about how I totally
captured
agree
me.
with all your complaints you had like a month ago about that game, by the way?
Which one, Horizon or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll get to
Yeah.
that, I think.
yeah, we can talk about that later. But so for Prey, I mean, you guys have played BioShock, yeah? And Keith, you've obviously played System Shock too at this point.
Yeah.
I haven't played a whole lot of System Shock, but everything about Prey, like everything they do right, is pretty much taken out of the BioShock playbook and kind of remixed in its...
BioShock is essentially just a streamlined System Shock 2, all the way down to just telling the same story again.
Well, that's good, because this tells a different story, which is probably refreshing. But, like, I don't want to talk about the plot too much, but it kind of has that same like weird isolation that both of them have, plus like Dead Space and some other things, where you're, as far as you could generally tell in the entire game, you're the only person left alive. There's a couple of people like stuck here and there. But for the most part, you're the only one that was left alone because you're trapped in this like simulation bunker, and everybody else is dying around you or dead around you, and you're finding all these corpses and stuff like that. And like you read most of the plot via books and like audio logs and stuff like that.
But you're supposedly on a space station.
But yeah, so the entire
You
point
don't know
is
if you are on a space
you're like
station.
on a space station, and the aliens that apparently you've been using to make like crazy leaps and bounds in sciences have finally kind of found the weak point that
Allows them to...
I love that about the game, that you can't tell if you're on a space station or not. Like, you just like are going through windows and shit, and then it's like all like sound stages and stuff. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.
yeah. So that's just the beginning, which is really clever in its own right. But like after a while, you very clearly find out that like yeah, you're probably on a space station. You can see space, you can see stars and shit. But it's just they made a really weird decision to have effectively head crabs come back. If you've played Half-Life, the basic enemy from Prey is it's like a little spidery crab thing. And it was absolutely a brilliant decision. All of the enemies can hide themselves as like coffee cups, tables, chairs.
We
you
likened it
name
to
it.
prop hunt.
Yeah, I was calling it horror prop hunt because it totally does that. It's this like scary version of like you go into a room and there's like a bunch of med kits and like loot objects, and you have to ask
one of the
yourself.
two trash cans in the room jiggles.
Yeah, well, yeah. or I ran into
It's
a
a
room.
mimic.
Yeah, late at night actually. I ran into a room. And I walked in and I'm like, oh, there's the mimic. I shoot the mimic. And then every other prop in the room proceeds to turn into a mimic, mob me, and kill me.
That's
And I'm just
cool.
like, what?
Oh, yes.
It was such a good feeling. And like, it's one of the few games where like death doesn't bother me because I know that I can do it better the second time around generally.
It's a very delightful game, like, to be scared in. Like, it
Yeah.
gets the...
Oh, yeah.
It's
I'm not even-
so good.
I'm not even like scared half the time. It's just like, I'm tense. I'm not freaked out. I'm not worried that I'm going to die. I know that I'm going to die. I've accepted that part. It's just a matter of like, trying to prolong my like, my run as long as possible before I have to like reload and redo things. And that just feels really fun and interesting, I guess. There are like harder enemies, but even then they only take like 4 shots with a shotgun. So if you've got like good maneuvering and like you're using stuff to your advantage, you can pretty much just like bum rush an enemy to death. Or like one of the powers they give you immediately is like the kind of classic combat slowdown maneuver.
Max Payne.
Yeah, and pretty far in, you get the ability to recharge your special meter. And so at this point, every time I like run into anything that's like kind of hardish, yeah, anytime I run into one of these guys, I effectively like figure out how to get above them, and then like leap down onto them slow-mo style, shooting them in the face, and then they're just down, and then they can't hurt you. And yet, I'm still scared every single time I see one of them, even though I know I can kick their asses. It's just like, yeah, this is how you design a good game. Apparently, nightmare difficulty makes it legit scary because everything is going to kill you. But I'm not going to play on that difficulty. I'm just playing on normal. The one problem with the game is you have limited resources for a lot of things. So if you're playing on like nightmare, you legitimately do not have you will run out of ammo. Whereas right now I'm just kind of staying about even, though I recycled like half of my med kits because I was not using any of them. Oh yeah, that's one of the other things I really like about the game. They actually give you tons of health kits in the forms of these like little robotic operators in little safe rooms that will heal you up to full, repair your armor, it does like the Half-Life 2 armor style thing and stuff like that. So as long as you can make it back to a safe point, even if you've only got 20 HP, you're good to go, and you can go back up to full. And I kind of like that because,
That's kind of like the System Shock 2 way, pretty much. Oh, no. I'm sorry. In System Shock 2, how did it work, Keith? If you just died, it was like no consequence, but if you barely survived something, it was like shit. And you probably should have just died instead.
So much like BioShock, you had Vita chambers that would revive you, but you had to find them.
Yeah.
So if you didn't find one, then I think when you died, you just had to reload a save. Because you just couldn't
it was a game
revive
that had
anywhere.
both checkpoints and quick saves, which was
Whereas
an
once you had
interesting
had
choice,
your chamber unlocked, then every time you died, you respawn for the cost of like 10 currency, basically. Like you lose money each time you die a little bit. It was super cheap, but honestly, almost immediately I just I almost immediately refuse to ever get killed that way and revive that way. I would just always load a save every time I died, because even if it was a little while ago, like going all the way to some location that I spawn at when I die and finding my way all the way back to where I was like way more hassle than just reloading a save.
But so in Prey, you have like these health kits then? Is that what you're saying, Wander?
Well, you've got tons of health kits, but you've also got like little robots that you can go talk to. When you die, you're dead and you have to reload. But
does it have quick saves?
Yeah, constantly. In fact, I'm super happy with it. The load times are really short, and the quick saves are instant. Like, it doesn't even, like, chug the game at all. Like, I've
cool.
noticed with a lot of games, I guess older games, quick saving, it would, like, hang for a moment.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yes.
playing Morrowind right now, and if I press a quick save, quote unquote, then a progress bar fills up for like 10 seconds.
Well, yeah, but I mean, compared to how long a regular save took back then, like, it was
where you'd have
snappy.
to open a menu, click on save, create new save, manually type in the name of your save, then wait for the progress bar.
But
Yeah, tell us more about Prey.
I mean, honestly, I'd like to talk more, but it's kind of one of those where I want to finish it first, because it's
Fair
one
point.
of those where the plot could actually go in like really wacky way. And like I almost get the feeling they're gonna do one of my like least favorite plot twists in a in a way that like I'm actually going to like. And that is such a weird feeling for me.
Yeah, because one of your most despised ones is "It was all a dream," or "It was all a facade," or
Well, I mean, that's almost guaranteed with how this game is setting everything up.
Well,
like,
yeah. So part of it is like they set it up that your character has been stuck in this like mind loop, where like you haven't been like you've been stuck reliving what is it February something or other? No, March 25th for literally years.
We're playing a lot of
And-
Groundhog's Day games.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of. But you've been reliving this for so long that 3 years have gone by and you have no idea.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool, especially because it kind of sets the game up for like very potentially like, yeah, this was all fake. But I don't know. It's weird. I don't want to talk about it more because it might like actually spoil major plot points.
There was an old 4chan thing that I read a long time ago that did that specific thing really, really well, where the characters were
4chan.
stuck in this loop. Yeah, so this was back when this was a thread where it was kind of like Homestuck before Homestuck like took that idea and ran with it. But so all the people would like play along and stuff like that. And it was called Ruby Quest. And like the big reveal at the very end was that like you go and you talk to this character that is actually the first time you've ever seen that character, and they just like see you, immediately recognize the characters, and then just start saying like, "Oh, good to see you again. You must have like done really well to get here again." And then they revealed that like this was actually like the I think they said it was like the 60th time the player characters had actually reached that point before.
That's
And it
actually
was-
something
it was
I do
spooky.
like.
Oh, it was scary.
With the like it was all a dream thing. I really love it when it's like Groundhog's Day. Like, by the way, everything you just experienced was like fake.
Yeah.
Or not fake. Sorry, everything you just experienced, you've done before, like countless times.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good when people break out of it. It's sort of like what the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Time loops make me happy because like it's so interesting. I really appreciate it when like a time loop has like the characters like go off the rails by like the third or fourth time. They're just like, screw it, we're gonna do it this way.
Boy, do I have a Doctor Who
Isn't that what
episode
they
for
did
you.
in Groundhog Day? he kept trying to figure out how to break out of the time loop, and then after that, like he just
Didn't
accepted
care.
it and used it to improve himself. I always absolutely loved that about that movie.
Yeah.
Initially, though, he was actually starting to fool around with people and stuff. Like, oh, watch for this. You know, this is gonna happen.
He was a dick at the start of that movie. He wasn't a very nice dude at all, and then he became like a superhuman. And
It's like the whole
I saw
Ebenezer
that.
Scrooge thing.
Yeah, I saw that as a little kid, and I was like, someday I wanna be as cool as him. And then I tried and realized it was really hard, so I gave up.
What was cool about him?
Yeah, the important thing to do as you grow up is just compromise your ideals
Yeah, pretty much.
and just sort of just generally give up. We're old, by the way. You know that? We're all really old now.
Yeah.
We're ancient people.
It's weird.
So today I had the
Not
crushing.
really.
Today I had the crushing realization, going through my Discord chat, that it's full of all these little teenagers, and I
Yeah.
realized that teenagers nowadays were born after the Matrix came out.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that hits me.
Exactly. That's like normally the number game is like, haha, drive that stake into somebody else, and I don't really feel it. That one specifically, I'm like, oh fuck.
'Cause, yeah, that was
It's sort of like when my mom was talking about how she took my uncle to see Star Wars in theaters.
Yeah.
Like,
to be fair, we do have people a fair bit older than us making fun of us in my chat right now.
Yeah.
So
Hi, Omni.
It's
yeah.
one of those things where like the funny thing happens because like in my generation it was pretty normal to not get Star Wars as like why it was different or special or anything like that, and now kids and teenagers don't get the Matrix. Like they don't understand that like everything
Really?
changed
Oh
and like
man, don't
like,
tell me that.
like when Matrix came out, action movies changed.
That's true. They
Forever.
got so much better.
Like the Matrix did for action movies what like the Pixies did for alternative rock, where they wrote new rules that everyone follows even if you don't know that that's where they came from. Like this shit where people like do these crazy it was
Kung
the end of
fu.
the action hero. Like we no longer have this big brawny American dude that's going to shoot you with a Gatling gun. Like we always have like
a
these
hacker.
like we have all these like these like suave characters, or these like really fast agile characters, or like these people that are going to outsmart the problem, or we have the idea like characters that have this grudge against each other and now they're going to like sit down and monologue fucking philosophy at each other from across a room. Like all this weird shit just didn't exist like
Suicide
a few
Squad.
decades ago. There's all these weird elements of action movies that are just super common that just didn't exist.
well, actually, now that I think about it, weren't a lot of like 50s and 60s films? I mean, look at like
You're the
James
only one who knows
Bond
anything
action-
about those movies. This group.
Think about the instances in which the hero would encounter the villain. There were tons of monologues back then too. They weren't quite as cryptic, nor was there a lot of like combat in between, and the villain surely wouldn't fight. But there
But
was
there's a
lot of
fundamental
that.
style difference,
like the
though.
noir or the spy films, that kind of deal.
That's that's talking, but it's a completely different type, basically. Like it's a completely different tone, but like, there's a very
Like,
there's a very
what
noticeable
would an evil
thing.
person say? I'm going to say that.
There's a super noticeable thing where watching an action movie from the 90s is like listening to alternative rock from the 80s, and like something's massively different about the thing that's called the same thing, and you maybe can't tell what it is, but it's huge.
I mean, it's like listening to old school hip hop, like from like the like 80s or like early 80s or something like that.
It is actually absolutely fascinating running across a movie from the 90s pre like CG being a huge thing. Like even prior like Star Wars like action movies and stuff like that. Like what was I watching? I think I was trying to watch like one of the Rambo movies, and I was just like, this is hard to watch.
Also, I'm trying to think back to the
Like-
late 30s with like Errol Flynn and stuff. You know, like the Adventures
Again,
of Robin Hood and whatnot.
You know way more about this than any of us.
Well, like as they came out,
but-
like Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and The Matrix just changed everything as they came out.
Yeah.
Like they,
Oh,
that
Jurassic
was that
Park?
was huge. Yeah,
Oh,
Jurassic
absolutely.
Park.
Oh, I
that
love
basically
Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park
do
and
too.
Jaws each respectively like had massive effects on the direction of like the Hollywood blockbuster and the summer blockbuster and like how you make those kinds of movies and how you structure them and stuff like that. Like there's just a thing where like at the time, even if you don't notice it, if you watch stuff before and after a certain date, you see huge differences.
Honestly, thinking about it, it might
Jurassic
actually.
Park.
I might say Indiana Jones might have had some amount
Probably.
of, because now that I'm thinking about it, like a lot of the Marvel movies kind of follow an Indiana Jonesy
Oh
formula.
yeah, well Indiana Jones
more
being
than
a
anything
trilogy
else.
as well. Yeah.
Anyway, continue with what you're saying. Sorry.
Right. I think the interesting thing about Jurassic Park was in a lot of sci-fi films prior, they would have the scientists investigating, you know, this new anomaly, discovery,
That's
yada yada.
true. Yeah.
And then they would have to fight some kind of monstrous creature and whatnot. But Jurassic Park sort of brought that kind of science, but into the modern day was something that was potentially achievable. I don't know. We're probably not going to be able to get dinosaurs anytime soon, but I know
Dino
that they-
DNA.
That's actually sort of not true. Isn't there that one laboratory that's working on creating a woolly mammoth right now?
Well, no, that's what I was just about to say. They will be able to do
Oh.
at least Ice Age
I see what you're
Wildlife.
getting at.
because
Yeah.
they still need, I think, more information. I think it's unfortunately a little bit too spliced, but they even addressed that in Jurassic Park by saying that they had to add extra DNA from frogs and existing reptiles, which is why the plot went the way it did.
I always liked
Gender swapping.
whenever my exposure to like really old sci-fi movies is entirely through Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I think my favorite scenes in those movies are always when they get the scientist, because it's the same character every time. You know, they go to like the
Sometimes played by the same
University of
actor.
probably, but you go to like the character's like, we need to go to the university to talk to and get them to examine the sample. And then there's always just this guy in like a lab coat, like surrounded by beakers.
That has
So-
massively
Usually-
already.
I've never seen anything
Usually
like this.
That scientist
assisted
is
by
already,
a
like-
young woman who's
Always
either,
assisted by a young woman.
who's sometimes their
pretty.
daughter,
Yeah.
And
So-
they just do science by flipping a switch.
and they become the love interest of the main hero.
Have you guys
typically.
noticed that that's Will Wheaton now, or no, not really?
No, but
What
that
is
would
he-
be
Anytime
What has he
Will-
been in?
He's been a villain in more recent
Yeah, so
things.
whenever Will Wheaton shows up, he's like the vaguely science-y, kind of sinister, like bearded dude that shows up for like a mini arc or a
what
season, and then he's
about
gone.
him suggests that?
I don't know. It's just he's typecast himself that way. He was that in Big Bang Theory. He was that in whatever sci-fi show you were watching.
Oh, that was
I don't think I've seen him in anything.
it's like something eight or
Yeah, I don't know.
Dark Matter.
Yeah, Dark Matter.
Yeah, he was also in what was it? The Guild.
Yeah, he was in the
Yeah.
Guild as one of the vaguely bearded villains. Or-
Yeah, like for me, he was Wesley. Then they locked him in a locker for like 30 years, and then he just like popped out.
So Neil Patrick Harris.
He just popped out of a closet to like host tabletop. And
Yeah.
that's his
Oh,
entire
yeah.
career, from my perspective.
Yeah, no, he acts in
seen none of the
television
things.
shows now, and he's randomly just this, like, always kind of typecast as the same, you know, kind of intellectual, nerdy guy with a really weird beard. And that's just,
That is
him.
weird
It's
to me.
odd.
Yeah, just like it's always the same character, and he's just like, I've never seen anything like this. I don't know, blah blah blah, and then it's just like you're gonna have to go into the caves with a stick of dynamite and blow them up, and then that's basically the rest of the movie. And then
particles.
they go into the cave. It takes them like 35 minutes. And then you just see like the weird like clay animal puppet thing that just goes like and then they blow it up, and then that's the movie.
It was actually interesting seeing remakes of all those old films, whether it be War of the Worlds
remake
or
them?
The Thing. Yeah, The Thing. You know, the 80s The Thing was after the 50s The Thing. And
shit, you're right.
And then there's also a 2010s The Thing.
Oh.
And
Yeah. Or
They
everyone
haven't-
already, much like RoboCop and other remakes, everyone already forgot that one happened.
There was
It's like
a
the
RoboCop
Thing total-
remake.
Yeah, The Thing, Total Recall, and RoboCop, or like everyone already forgot all of those remakes happened.
oh yeah, I had to show all my friends the original Total Recall because Arnold Schwarzenegger and
That was one of
Aaron
those
Stone.
cases where when I saw the remake, I literally just had to go home and watch the original one immediately to like cleanse the palate.
Cleanse it.
And it was interesting because I really did enjoy the new Mad Max, but my friends coming over to my house to see our old VHSs of the original ones, that was fun too. Pretty much they always come over to my parents' house to see our old VHSs of anything that's being remade. It's like, here's the original version.
You're basically a museum.
Yeah, I suppose. It'll
have
be
we-
a sad day when VHSs start to deteriorate.
I don't
It's
remember.
gonna
Have
take
we
a long
taken this?
time.
Have we ever done a question or a topic about like what do we want to have never be remade?
No, we never had that as a question.
Now,
Like, for me,
remade
right on
because
top-
it would
right
be
on top
bad,
is
or
Dark
remade
Crystal.
because it would be good?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much anything from
Remakes always make the thing bad. It's
Yeah,
always-
exactly.
Yeah.
I prefer them. I prefer like spiritual sequels, like people kind of taking similar elements and remixing it, like Prey, for example.
but the
Or
the
BioShock
Dragonheart
or whatever.
sequels were terrible. And granted,
Which
a lot of
ones?
people
Dragonheart.
Dragonheart. I like
Oh.
the original Dragonheart, but people could argue otherwise. Really, it was Sean Connery that made it.
You
One
know
of
what
the
I
best
want?
Dragons ever.
I want to see them remake all of the Disney classics.
No,
They already are.
Yeah,
No,
it's
no,
like
no.
They're
actually,
already
here's-
doing that.
Was that the joke?
Yeah, well, that's true. They are doing like live. No, I want
Beauty
them to
and the Beast already
They're doing a
came out.
live
them.
action Lion King. How can they do that? It's just going to be 3D animated.
They just get like a fucking lion.
It's
Well,
just
that's
like it's just like stock footage of like safari lions with voices over them.
That's the thing. They
Yeah,
used to do
like Honey
things with
Badger.
live animals like Homeward Bound, but I think they're going Jungle Book way of having highly rendered 3D animals.
Yeah.
At which point it's like it's
I
still
just like the
animated.
idea of having. Oh shoot, who's the guy that always does the nature documentaries that has like the really famous
David Attenborough.
Yeah, David Attenborough just
Yeah.
being like, and then Simba ate Zazu.
Oh,
Shit.
them with the ants. Yes,
That's
fan.
not according to the script.
Or actually, maybe
Fuck
even
it, I'm
better.
old.
Yeah, maybe even better. What's his face from the guy that did the kind of like vaguely Morgan Freeman, like 10 facts about the oh shit. Do you remember
What?
Z Frank? There we go.
Sorry, I was distracted by the fact that someone
Like
had
Z.
actually
Frank
suggested
doing
a
it
remake
instead.
of the
That'd be
movie
great.
Them, and that's the one
Oh.
with the giant ants.
David Attenborough
giant
is dead,
ants.
I believe. Oh yeah, didn't he die
Also
recently?
From the 50s.
Did he?
I think that maybe that's why people were naming the boat after him. No, he's still alive.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only
He's-
I read a headline the other
1926,
day
he's
that
90
he was
years old.
He's old as shit though.
he's having hearing problems.
Yeah,
That's-
but no, he's still alive.
Yeah,
He's the
because he
oldest.
just finished filming a thing. Anyway, yeah, I want them to remake Mulan, but
I was saying, what do you want? Not want to never get remade.
right,
Yeah.
I want them to remake Mulan where like it's all 3D animated and
But-
like Mulan is like actually like an 8-year-old girl and like they go on like
And
zany
she has
adventures.
nightmares where they talk about sewing buttons over your eyes.
The only way I would
Ooh.
accept a remake is if they took all of the audio and then just did the 3D models. Because I actually really like the Frozen
Like
Tangled
a Game
3D
Grumps
style.
animated, but for a movie. Just
Yes.
reanimate the exact same
So-
movie.
Yeah.
I would
thing
love
is-
that.
I actually saw over my little vacation back to New York. I saw the new Beauty and the Beast, And growing up, Beauty and the Beast was one of my favorite Disney movies, probably the favorite. And because I had watched it enough, you know how you can pretty much guess at the next lines, it's sort of memorized. So obviously I had this comparison, and I just noticed that the acting was a bit awkward. I did like what they did with Kevin Kline's Maurice, and like adding a little bit more backstory with him, and he wasn't quite as bumbly, I should say, as the old one was. But I don't know, that I felt like it was rushed at times, and the characters, because they were 3D modeled, a lot of the objects didn't actually exude enough expression, and that was quite unfortunate. Because, I mean, they had Ian McKellen as Cogsworth, and oh, come on, I should know.
What they should do is they should remake
Ian.
Beauty and the Beast,
What?
but flip it. So, like, Belle
Oh,
is
yeah.
just, like,
Okay.
incredibly ugly and monstrous.
Beast
And
is
the
just the only
Beast
human.
is-
Okay, so
Yeah.
if I
Becomes
wanted to
I Am
see,
Legend.
if I ever saw like a new kind of Beauty and the Beast movie
Legend.
made, I would want it to actually be a rendition of East of the Sun and West of the Moon, because it's a mixture of Beauty and the Beast, Eros and Psyche, you know, like the old Greek mythology tale, and then have a troll queen. The Beast Prince is actually like a massive polar bear, and the female character actually has to save him in the second arc from the troll queen. So, yeah.
Yeah. So does anyone have any serious questions or answers? Because I just
Okay.
thought, like, my answer for things to remake was I was just like, I want to see if I can destroy everyone's childhood. I think I did okay.
I mean, the question was, what do you want to not get remade?
Not remade. Yeah, it would have to be really nice classics that just couldn't be. I'm trying to think.
It also wasn't even an audience question. It was just a question I asked in response to the topic of remakes.
I mean,
I just
not even
don't
movies.
don't want them to ruin Dark Crystal ever.
Yeah,
Not even movies, but I'd hate a Half-Life remake, which would never happen to begin with. But also, like, that would probably be really weird.
AAA
It's
studio
called Black
remake of
Mesa, dude.
Half-Life.
It was
It's
actually pretty fun.
episodic. It comes out 1 hour per 5 months.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Black Mesa. Shit. All right, well, let's throw that out the window. What other games?
Yeah, Black Mesa was really good, actually.
I never played enough of it. I saw you playing it. I was like, oh, that seems neat. I
Yeah.
think there's a difference, though, between, like, a AAA studio remaking something and a bunch of fans being like, we need to
That's
remake
true.
this.
The fans will pull out the stuff that's generally, like, the stuff that really makes something good, I think.
Yeah, it's not EA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My problem with AAA remakes are they almost always feel like a cash grab. And like a bad one, like Ratchet and Clank did the remake lately, and it wasn't bad, but it felt soulless.
It's
You know what they
soulless
should
because the
do?
movie's terrible.
Yeah,
And it's a tie-in
We've had
for a
this-
movie that's terrible.
Yeah, we've had this discussion before where really it's just tiring that there's nothing new coming into
I'm
Hollywood.
so sick of the Spider-Man
Yeah, like-
remakes. I hope this new one is
Yeah.
going to be good, so we actually
Hopefully it'll be
don't
like the
have
final
another.
canon of it, because we've
Yeah,
seen
Hope
what,
so,
3?
too. What they should do... Okay, so you know how people looked at Harry Potter, and then they, like, made Quidditch into, like, a real sport, and they played that a lot? What they should do is
Web
they should do the
slinging?
same thing with John Madden's NFL. They should look at that and turn that into a sport.
Turn video game versions of sports into real sports.
Yeah.
Blood Bowl.
No,
NFL
no
Blitz.
football. They
which
should make a
reminds
sport
me-
out of football.
Aren't they making a new version of Rollerball? Or did they actually already come out with a new version of Rollerball?
They should make a sport out of NBA Jam, where every time anyone gets the ball, they just throw it at the fucking hoop again.
A sport out of God, what was that? Like the old Sega Genesis NBA game where you could only control 2 people at a time, and it was just like slam dunk contests.
And the two characters like run together, kind of.
Yeah.
Almost like they were the people on a foosball table. That was like I think that was the inspiration for early sports game, was to make them play like foosball tables, where your team would just kind of awkwardly run around as a grid that you were controlling simultaneously, and just weird shit would happen.
I'm not entirely sure.
Wait, I think the
if
game you
that's
just
accurate or not, because they had another sport called basketball that they probably based that game off of.
Wait, I think the game that you just described was just the game I was talking about, NBA Jam.
Yes.
God damn it.
Shit, they did do that. They did just pick it up and throw it back. Wow.
Oh, I know good movies that shouldn't be remade. Any of the Ghibli films?
Well, duh. They're timeless. I mean, anything that's 2D animated almost pretty much doesn't need a remake.
But then Disney's doing all their live action stuff.
It doesn't need a remake. They're doing it anyway. Like, real life things. I wouldn't mind seeing a remake of what was it? Titan AE. Just because that early 3D was atrocious.
Well, Titan AE could actually translate into a good live action film. But that's because, like, the TV film, like, had a great concept and potential, just didn't quite hit the emotional chord. People are talking about Tremors. There's been too many sequels of that.
Ass blasters.
I love the giant flying ass blasters. Those are the funniest villains.
When are we going to do our
I've ever
commentary
seen
tracks
in
for
any
the
game.
entire Tremors and Starship Troopers franchises?
I mean, I'd start with
I used to
Starship
never
Troopers
say
'cause
game
I'm
when I was
interested
talking
in
about.
this.
I'm ruining people.
Yes, but it's funny when you ruin people that aren't me.
No, suck it up,
The
bird.
real problem when it ruins me.
I'm infectious.
I like the Tremors movies, honestly.
I find it hilarious that aside from Kevin Bacon, most of the like other members of the cast had at least made appearances. And then the guy that had his whole arsenal and was the like in movie universe husband of Reba McEntire. That was one of her first like acting roles before she became like she'd probably already become a huge country singer by that point.
Probably,
but in any case, wasn't he pretty much a consistent fixture of the sequels up until maybe the fourth? There's been about 6 Tremors movies now.
Yeah.
There's been
I'm reading
many.
about like what Ron Underwood has done since Tremors.
Is he
he's the director.
Oh, okay.
He does a bunch of TV stuff. It looks he does like special appearances on like a lot of different things. But yeah, it looks like he didn't really hit it out of the park so much. Like 1990 Tremors, 2002 The Adventures of Pluto Nash. Ooh.
Oh boy.
I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Oh, Shell, you would love The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
Okay.
You and Wander need to watch it.
This sounds like a trap.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind.
This sounds like a trap.
No,
I've already
even
forgotten.
even if you can't get Wander to watch it,
Oh,
you should watch The Adventures of Pluto Nash.
Okay,
I've
so it's
seen
Eddie
this.
Murphy.
I don't remember shit about it, but I remember
I probably
it.
remember the trailers for it.
Has an IMDb score of a 3.8 and a Metascore of 12.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Was that
Whoa.
what is that, like his Dr. Dolittle kind of era?
What?
I think so. Yeah, that was
What has
definitely the
Murphy
peak,
been
or
up
not
to
the
lately?
peak, but
A
I don't
38
know.
from the New York Daily News is the highest score that Pluto Nash has ever received.
But yeah, no, that was definitely. I think The Adventures of Pluto Nash was probably what like sunk Eddie Murphy, because he was like on an upswing for a while. Then he started that, and it was done.
Well, yeah.
Shrek took Eddie Murphy out because he made so much fucking money that he just didn't need to care anymore.
Wasn't Pluto Nash after Shrek?
No.
Yeah,
Shrek.
What was it?
Shrek.
Shrek was
that was
2001.
2002.
Pluto
I
Nash is
Spy,
2002.
Showtime, Daddy Daycare. Oh.
I guess you're right about that. I'm just thinking of Shrek 2, Shrek 3, Shrek Forever After, Shrek 5, which is going to be 2019, 2020. Not to mention the side.
I think I've only seen the first
Stuff.
2, and I couldn't care. to
Yeah,
watch
I feel like
anymore.
I chose poorly when I never watched past the second one. I mean, chose correctly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
think
was,
you did a good job.
I think I tried watching the third and it was terrible. The second one had like one or two moments that were okay, but then it ended. Ugh.
It's interesting looking back through the careers of various actors and seeing what kind of roles they've
See,
taken
I do
on.
that, and then I end up on shoot.
I don't know how. I don't know if
TV
it's that
tropes.
interesting. I think it's mostly sucking us back into the IMDb hole again.
Yeah, it pretty much
We
is.
have to pull back. This
But-
happens like once every 2 or 3 podcasts. We just have to escape the IMDb hole.
I
Wasn't
always
there one
just get
podcast
stuck
where
on.
all we did was read IMDb to each other?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh wow, that guy was in that, and that was the whole conversation repeating. So I'm curious, Bird, do you
Honey,
know?
I Shrunk the Kids. What?
Bird, are you aware of like
Yes.
Okay,
how?
yeah.
I can't talk over this.
Sorry.
It's fine. What were you asking me, Keith?
I was curious if you would know, like, what happened with alternative music. I kind of brought this up earlier. Like, what changed between the 80s and the 90s?
Alternative music is such a nebulously defined thing, you know? Like, it's really hard to say.
Probably computers.
Oh
was-
yeah,
it was just a
definitely
weird-
electronics.
It was just a weird thing where, like, first alt rock changed, and then it started infecting pop music, and basically
Yeah.
every chunk of music in general from that point on, and it just got
Well,
weird.
Part of it is, Keith, we had computers, so bands didn't need to be the band. Like, you could get singers, effectively, who would sing to some, like, pre-made piece of music from elsewhere. And I think that kind of took over as, like, one of the main reasons why music changed heavily, was, you know, you had a bunch of really good...
So what I'm actually hinting at is loud, quiet, loud.
Oh.
You know what that is, Bird?
Isn't that like the formula that like is most typically personified by Smells Like Teen Spirit and stuff like that?
More or less, yeah. Like there was the Pixies started doing it, and then more or less Nirvana put out an album that was so fundamentally similar to a Pixies album that it actually had the same chord progressions and structures in its songs. Like it got that weirdly specific.
Well, I mean,
And-
the Pixies was like absolutely the biggest influence on Kurt Cobain, I think.
Yeah,
He,
and like,
he says that quite a bit.
like this came
said
to
it,
mind. This came to mind because of the fact we're talking about like how all those different specific movies changed their genres when they came out and stuff like that. And so I was thinking about what happened to alternative rock, because if you listen to alt rock in the 80s, there just isn't any loud, quiet, loud, and then it just suddenly started happening, and now it's starting to affect all of pop music and just goes everywhere. And what that is this weird thing where basically when the verses of the song are playing, you'll usually just have like drums and bass guitar and soft singing, and then when the chorus comes in, suddenly the guitar starts going in with like really heavy chords, and the singer's significantly louder, and so on and so forth. So like you really hear that with like In Bloom and Smells Like Teen Spirit. Well,
Wait a minute. That sounds. I'm actually playing through a lot of Elvis songs in my head right now because I grew up with a lot of that, and the chorus lines definitely were louder.
Yeah, but I think that with alternative rock, it's a very specific phenomenon that like got the like Keith is alluding to, where this is like a topic that I only kind of know a little bit about because I'm not actually too big of a fan of like alternative rock from the 80s or the Pixies, to be totally honest.
I was just like, I'm
But,
gonna poke the music person.
Yeah, but I think that like with like this idea of like loud, quiet, loud and stuff like that, it was different from like rock and roll because in the 80s we had a lot more noise music influence in it at that time. So it wasn't just like, you know, it didn't like amp it, when Elvis gets louder, it's like hyping up the energy. When like the Pixies get louder, it's like increasing the chaos.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not like a like good mood, it's just like more of like a scream or like a primal type of shout, stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
Understand.
It's one of those
So
things where
it's-
once you start noticing it, it becomes one of those things like with the music stuff, where just like the moment you notice it, you can switch back and forth between the decades, and you can immediately pick up on like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
like here's let's listen to Ballroom Blitz or Rock This Town and stuff like that, and you start noticing that there's like a flatness to the song, which isn't really good or bad, but like the fact that like it's like music used to be more consistent in what the song was throughout the duration of the song, unless you were listening to like Rush or something.
What I dislike now, especially, is that I notice that people aren't focusing as much on the melodies. So it seems like there are so many songs now. I can't pick out something that I can latch onto, and many of the songs start sounding the same. It's really saddening.
Sorry, there's like an alarm going on outside my window. I had to check it out. What were you saying?
Oh, I was saying that I was just disappointed that in the past it seemed like there were concrete melodies that would be used to like define the song, and now it seems like the chorus lines and like
it's about the rhythm, and it's about
monotonous.
like well, what it is it's the same note repeated over and over again. Like think like was it Get Lucky, for example, like da 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 da, like it's like the same note like over and over again, and then like one note up. Yeah, like it's about or like Suit and Tie. That was another like hit that I can think of where it's like da 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 da. Like it's the same notes over and over and over again. Whereas I think that with a lot of older music, it was defined very much like with it was a lot more like flowiness to the melodies, and it kind of went more
Unless it was funk
all over the
more
place.
percussive, yeah.
Yeah. Well, funk, I mean, it depends on the type of funk. Like, funk is a genre I actually know a ton about. So.
There's a whole lot of popular funk, though, that is like one riff repeating for 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some tough stuff to get through sometimes.
Yeah.
Like stuff,
But
it's the
then
type of
there's
stuff
also,
like it's stuff, the type of stuff you only know because it's used as like a stinger for like a commercial or something, and then you hear the real one, you're like, oh, that's the whole song forever. It just keeps going like that, exactly like that.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Like some like really early funk, if you listen to it, it's like 9 minutes, and it's like
Get up, get on up.
It's that for the entire song. And just like people being like, yeah, come on, yeah, gonna get funky tonight, yeah.
Like it's just supposed to be background for, like it's supposed to be just background for dancing or something.
Yeah, it's but I love George Clinton. Oh my god, I love like that early funk so much because it's like the weirdest stuff. Like I don't know, like, if you all have ever, like, even heard of, like, a lot of, like, the stuff that he did, but, like, he would just get, like, a chorus of people to just, like, shout things behind him, and, like, kind of to rhythms, and then he would get, like, people to sing, and it was, like, this really weird, like, back and forth, where it was just, like, groups of people shouting, and then, like, somebody singing, then groups of people shouting. George Clinton's awesome. So yeah, we've talked about, let's reel this back into video games, I guess. Because this is ostensibly...
Let's get to something that Warner wants to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I've had this question for a little while. Let me find it. Okay, I didn't put it away. Okay. Sorry,
he's been teasing us with a nebulous question.
Yeah, well,
of unknown origin.
I was gonna ask it a while ago, but then Shell was busy, and then you had the politics thing, and yeah. So anyway, so the question is, okay, so Keith, you're standing in waist-deep water, in thick, gross, muddy water. Sorry. You're groggy, and you don't know where you are, but before you can get your bearings, a dark humanoid shape emerges from the water in front of you. It's carrying a rusty hook, and a shield made of what was probably the top of a barrel, once upon a time. It doesn't look friendly, and you only have a few seconds before it reaches you. What do you do?
This is not at all what I thought this was gonna...
I know.
Is this like a choose-your-own-adventure, like... Are we playing a D&D campaign today? Is that why you said it was going to take a while?
You got in a hole in one, which is why I wanted time. So,
I'm like, what the?
You guys said like a couple weeks
Answer
ago
his
that you
damn
wanted.
question, Keith.
I wasn't fucking ready for this.
You guys said
I'm
a couple
in
weeks ago that you
mud
wanted
and
somebody to make a D&D campaign for you, so I did, and then I decided I'd ask it as part of a question.
What was the mud situation again?
So you're
what was that?
waist deep in mud is going to be hell to edit, but that's okay.